When you think of a nation showing off its military strength, you probably picture something loud. The thunderous roar of a fighter jet tearing across the sky at an air show, or the dramatic plume of smoke from a long-range missile test that lights up the dawn. These are the things designed to make headlines. Big, visible statements of power. But sometimes the most significant shifts in the balance of power don't make any noise at all. They happen quietly, far from the cameras, noted only in dense technical reports. That's exactly what happened in the Indian Ocean a few weeks ago. There were no press conferences, no dramatic videos, just a quiet confirmation that a new system works. It's a rocket, but not the kind that travels thousands of miles. This one flies just a few kilometers out from a warship, plunges into the water, and serves as a very unwelcome, very precise wake-up call for anyone trying to hide in the deep. And why this quiet, unassuming upgrade matters so much has everything to do with a silent, invisible game of chess being played beneath the waves of one of the world's most important oceans.
And that silent game, you, the listener, is precisely what we are exploring in this deep dive. This is really a study in strategic depth, focusing on a specific, recently tested, low-key technology, this short-range anti-submarine rocket. It reflects a huge strategic pivot towards mastering the subsurface environment of the Indian Ocean region, the IOR.
Okay.
So our mission today really is to analyze three connected threads. First, how India is bolstering its anti-submarine warfare, or ASW capabilities, through this indigenous development.
Right, building it themselves.
Exactly. Second, how this new system integrates into a much larger high-tech network of air and surface assets. It's not just standalone. And third, the profound geopolitical implications this level of capability has for maintaining security and, crucially, strategic autonomy in the increasingly competitive IOR.
Okay, let's start with the hardware itself then. The quiet test of the Extended-Range Anti-Submarine Rocket, the ERSR. Now, this wasn't a world record breaker for distance, as you said. The key seems to be extended range, so it's about improving on what they had before.
Precisely. It's designed to improve on previous short-range ASW munitions. Think of it as filling a very specific tactical gap right around the warship itself. Close in defense, but with a bit more reach and speed.
So it's the final answer if something gets too close.
It is potentially the final answer in a potentially deadly confrontation. The ERSR is essentially a rocket-propelled depth charge system. It's fired from a surface warship, uses a rocket motor to, rapidly cover distances of a few kilometers.
They're not long range then, more like rapid reaction range.
That's a good way to put it. Rapid reaction range. Once it travels those few kilometers, the warhead detaches, plunges into the water, and engages the submerged target.
So it gives the surface ship a much faster and slightly wider protective bubble compared to, say, traditional depth charges or maybe torpedoes that need more time.
Exactly. Faster response, wider radius than weapons that might require the target to be practically right next to the hull, gives the ship more breathing room, more options.
Okay, but why build it yourself? I mean, surely there are systems like this available in the international market. Why go through the massive effort and expense of designing and testing it entirely in-house?
And that question gets right to the heart of the strategic implication here. The indigenous nature of the ERSR development is arguably more important than the rocket itself.
How so?
It's all about strengthening strategic autonomy and industrial resilience. Think about it. If you rely solely on imports for critical defense hardware, you're always vulnerable.
Vulnerable to what? Politics.
Sanctions.
Sanctions.
Exactly. Shifts in global politics, sudden sanctions, maybe even just a vendor deciding to prioritize another customer or facing their own production issues. It happens.
So building it yourself means you control the whole chain.
Precisely. The ERSR represents India's commitment to internal capacity. It's about controlling the entire ASW process, from the initial sensor detection right down to the weapon delivery mechanism. No weak links dependent on others.
And this focus on indigenous capability, especially underwater, is this a recent thing or does it have deeper roots?
Oh, absolutely. Deeper roots. This isn't some new trend. The commitment to indigenous capability in the underwater domain, it goes back decades.
Really?
Yes. For instance, the Naval Science and Technological Laboratory, NSTL, was set up way back in 1969.
Wow, okay.
And its explicit long-term objective right from the start was achieving self-reliance in underwater technology. They've spent over 50 years building up that expertise, often under, pretty challenging circumstances.
So the ERSR isn't just a new rocket, it's the outcome of decades of investment.
Exactly. It's the latest, maybe most high-profile product of that sustained national investment. It's about ensuring the nation controls its own anti-submarine warfare destiny. And like we said, it is that final, crucial capability in the ASW chain, the mechanism that actually delivers the kill.
Okay, that really clarifies the importance of ERSR as that close-in, rapid response weapon and why building it indigenously matters so much. Yeah. But you mentioned the ASW chain. If a submarine is only a few kilometers away from your warship, isn't that already a bit too close for comfort? Haven't you sort of missed the first step, which is detecting them much further out?
That's a very sharp point. Yes, ideally, you want to detect and track potential threats long before they get within ERSR range.
So the rocket is kind of useless on its own. It needs targeting data, precise targeting data.
Absolutely. It needs to know exactly where the target is. And that requires tracking capabilities that stretch far, far beyond just a few kilometers. Which brings us to the integrated network. The systems that find these targets long before they become an immediate threat.
Right. This is where it gets complex, the system of systems.
Exactly. The complexity of modern warfare really comes into play here. ERSR is just the tip of a very long spear, one that stretches across the entire Indian Ocean, metaphorically speaking. To understand the brain of the operation, we actually need to look up into the air.
Ah, the aerial assets.
Yes. The entire system relies on this integrated, high-tech network of assets all working together, air, surface, probably subsurface too.
And I guess the undisputed workhorse for that long-range maritime patrol and submarine hunting, that would be the P-8I Neptune aircraft.
You got it. The P-8I is the Indian Navy's premier long-range maritime patrol and ASW platform. It's based on a commercial airliner frame, the 737, but it's packed with incredibly sophisticated sensors and multi-mission capabilities.
Now, what's interesting, I read, is that the Indian version, the P-8I, isn't quite the same as the P-8A Poseidon used by, say, the U.S. Navy or others.
That's absolutely correct, and this is crucial. The Indian variant, the P-8I, incorporates unique customized additions, features tailored specifically for the operational environment of the Indian Ocean region.
Okay, let's unpack those. What specific sensor systems did India insist on including that maybe other operators didn't prioritize as much?
Well, there are several, but two key systems really set the P-8I apart. First, there's the ANAPS 143 V3 Ocean Eye radar. It's an advanced radar, really good for maritime surveillance, tracking surface targets, high-resolution imaging, that sort of thing. Essential piece of kit.
Okay, standard high-end radar, what's the unique part?
The truly unique element, the one that really signals India's specific focus, is the inclusion of the magnetic anomaly detector, or MED sensor.
MED, magnetic anomaly detector.
Right. The specific system is the NSQ 508A AMEDS. Now, this sensor is unique to the Indian P-8I variant. You won't find it on the standard U.S. Navy P-8A, for instance.
Why did they omit it on the U.S. version? I thought MED booms were standard on older patrol planes.
They were, on things like the P-3 Orion. The U.S. Navy decided for the P-8A that relying on network sensors, underwater hydrophone arrays, and primarily acoustic detection via sonobuoys was sufficient, and omitting the MED boom saved weight and complexity.
But India specifically wanted it back in. Why is that MED sensor considered so strategically vital for operations in the IOR? What does it tell us?
It tells us a lot about the perceived threat and the specific operating environment. MED works, as the name suggests, by detecting tiny disturbances in the Earth's natural magnetic field. These disturbances are caused by the large metallic hull of a submerged vessel, like a submarine.
Okay, detecting metal underwater.
Right, and unlike active sonar, which blasts out sound pulses pinging and potentially gives away the hunter's position.
Right, the target knows you're looking.
Exactly. MED is entirely passive. It just listens, magnetically speaking. It doesn't emit anything.
And why is passive detection so good in the IOR?
It particularly excels at detecting very quiet, slow-moving diesel-electric submarines, the kind that don't need to run noisy reactors constantly. And these are often the types of submarines found deployed in the competitive, sometimes congested waters of the IOR.
Ah, so it's tailored to the likely threat profile in that specific region.
Precisely. While the U.S. approach might lean more on vast global sensor networks and acoustic focus, India's decision to integrate MED demonstrates a clear commitment to having a self-sufficient, high-fidelity detection capability built right into their primary ASW aircraft. It's optimized for the regional threat.
So it turns the P-8I from just a general eye in the sky into a more specialized, almost like a low-altitude submarine bloodhound, sniffing out magnetic signatures.
That's a good analogy, yes. It adds another layer, another type of sensor that's particularly effective against certain quiet submarine types, especially when they might be trying to use thermal layers or other conditions to hide from sonar.
And the reach of these P-8Is, it's not just around India's coastlines, is it? They seem to operate far and wide.
Oh, their deployment reach is genuinely strategic. These planes operate not just from key Indian Navy bases like INS Radali or INS Hansa, but they leverage bilateral logistics agreements to operate from a whole network of locations across the globe.
Like where?
We're talking about places like the French territory of La Réunion Island in the southern Indian Ocean, Mauritius's Agalega Island, Australia's Cocos Keeling Islands, even at Tsugi in Japan, and crucially, Andersen Air Force Base on the U.S. territory of Guam in the Pacific.
Guam. That's quite a reach into the Pacific.
It is. This network gives them massive operational scope. It allows them to cover vast swaths of the Indian Ocean, obviously, but also extend surveillance and presence well into neighboring seas, the South China Sea, the Western Pacific. It helps create a much more seamless, continuously monitored maritime environment.
That reach is incredible. It makes sense then that a former commanding officer of INS 312, the first P-8I squadron, Captain A.K. Singh, made a pretty bold claim. He reportedly said something like, there was no possibility that any ship or submarine would be able to pass the Indian Ocean region without the 312 squadron coming to know about it. That sounds like supreme confidence. Is that hyperbole, or is there something behind that kind of assertion?
Well, it's certainly a statement of very high confidence. Whether it's literally true 100% of the time is hard to verify, obviously. But that kind of confidence likely stems from a high degree of integration between their various intelligence sources.
Meaning, it's not just the P-8Is flying blind searches.
Exactly. You have to remember, as we touched on, the P-8I is often primarily a pinpointing tool. It's not usually doing the initial broad ocean search itself.
So where did the first hint come from?
That initial wide area detection, the first whisper of something being out there, that comes from the overall intelligence picture. That could be shore-based hydrophone arrays listening underwater. It could be sonar contacts from surface warships, information from submarines, satellite reconnaissance, even intelligence sharing with partner nations.
Okay, so multiple feeds build the initial picture.
Right. Once a potential target is suspected or maybe triangulated or somehow narrowed down to a finite area, say a box a few dozen square miles, then the P-8I is rapidly cued to that specific location. Its speed is key here.
Got it. So it's not the first step. It's more like the decisive middle step. It flies quickly to the suspected area.
Precisely. Its job then becomes to saturate that defined area. How? By deploying sonobuoys. Dozens of them if needed.
Those small, expendable listening devices, they drop from the plane.
Exactly. They drop patterns of passive buoys listening for noise, active buoys sending out pings, special-purpose buoys measuring water conditions, all to locate that submarine with extreme three-dimensional precision, getting that exact depth, course, and speed.
And that's the targeting data needed for a weapon.
That is the crucial link. Moving from general awareness, there might be something in this area, to the final tactical targeting solution, the kind of precise data needed to cue a weapon, whether it's a torpedo dropped from the P-8I itself, or maybe vectoring a warship into position to use its own weapons, like the ERSR rocket if the target gets too close.
Okay, that detailed, focused hunt using the P-8I sounds incredibly effective, but it also sounds incredibly expensive. Flying a large, sophisticated jet like that, deploying dozens of single-use sonobuoys, that must cost a fortune per mission.
It does. High-end ASW is resource-intensive.
And if you need continuous, 247 surveillance across such a massive ocean region, trying to keep track of more and more naval activity, that high operational tempo must really strain budgets and maybe even airframe life. Crew fatigue.
You've hit on a critical point, and that strain, that operational reality, brings us directly to the strategic value of India's planned acquisition of MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones. They've signed the deal for, I believe, 15 for the Navy, plus others for the Army and Air Force, but the naval ones are key here.
Right, the high-altitude, long-endurance drones.
Exactly. The introduction of these MQ-9B UAVs is a really critical strategic move, and it's driven, in large part, by exactly what you said, operational efficiency and cost management.
Because manned flights are just too expensive for constant patrol.
Well, the sheer volume of foreign naval vessels operating within the IOR, particularly from major naval powers like China, but others too, it has driven up the need for surveillance patrols significantly. And running manned aircraft like the P-8I constantly for routine surveillance racks up huge operational costs. Fuel, maintenance, crew hours. It all adds up.
So the drone acquisition isn't just about getting new tech, it's an operational necessity. It's about optimizing how they use their most expensive, high-value assets, like the P-8I.
Exactly. You nailed it. The P-8I is a highly specialized, multi-million-dollar platform. Just the cost per flight hour is enormous. You really don't want to use that asset for simple, routine, wide-area maritime surveillance, just watching the surface, if you can possibly avoid it.
And the drone can do that cheaper.
Much cheaper, relatively speaking. The MQ-9B offers persistent, cost-effective ISR intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and also SAR, search and rescue capabilities. The key word is persistent.
How long can they stay up?
They can loiter for immense periods, often over 30 hours, sometimes even longer, depending on the configuration and mission profile.
30 hours.
Yeah.
Compared to maybe 8-10 for a P-8I crew.
Right. Then without any issues of crew fatigue, plus lower fuel burn compared to a large jet.
That loiter time really is the game changer, isn't it? It means you can have continuous, unbroken surveillance over a specific area or shipping lane for days just by rotating drones.
It absolutely is. It creates a much more efficient division of labor within the whole maritime security ecosystem.
How does that division work in practice?
The MQ-9B basically takes over the routine, persistent surveillance role, providing those continuous eyes on the water, monitoring shipping, looking for anomalies, maintaining that broad maritime domain awareness picture. This then frees up the high-cost, highly specialized P-8I fleet to be used more strategically. They can be held ready for the really critical long-range ASW missions, the deep intelligence gathering tasks, situations where their advanced multi-mission sensors, their processing power, and importantly, their trained human crew are absolutely indispensable. You need human analysts on board for complex ASW.
Got it. So the drones do the long, boring stare, and the P-8Is are the specialized hunters, called in when needed.
That's a pretty good summary. So now you can see the integrated detection-to-strike capability taking shape. You have the MQ-9B providing that persistent, cost-effective, wide-area awareness.
Right.
You have the P-8I providing the advanced long-range precision detection and targeting, especially for submerged threats, using its unique sensor suite, including that MAD sensor.
Okay.
And then you have the ERSR providing the rapid, ship-based, short-range strike capability as that final layer of defense if something slips through or pops up unexpectedly close.
It really is a comprehensive ecosystem, spanning air, surface, and subsurface capabilities, all working together.
Indeed, but, and this is a big but, this entire sophisticated network, all these expensive platforms, are only as good as their fundamental understanding of the environment they operate in.
Meaning the ocean itself.
Precisely. And that environment, the tropical Indian Ocean, is notoriously uniquely difficult for underwater operations, especially involving acoustics.
Right. We often hear about the challenges of tropical waters for sonar.
It's the ultimate natural camouflage in many ways. So let's pivot now from the platforms to the environment itself. We need to talk about mastering underwater domain awareness, or UDA.
UDA. Okay. Different from MDA, maritime domain awareness.
Yes, related but distinct, and arguably more challenging. We, as observers, and maybe even militaries historically, have focused heavily on MDA tracking everything above the surface, ships, aircraft, traffic patterns. And MDA is pretty robust now. With radar, satellites, AIS tracking, you get good surface visibility. But conventional MDA critically fails because the most decisive processes and often the most dangerous threats lie beneath the surface, hidden by the water itself, and hidden particularly well by the complex physics of warm tropical water.
And when we talk about threats missed by just looking at the surface, it's not only about enemy submarines sneaking in, is it?
No, absolutely not. The list of subsurface threats and challenges is extensive, and it impacts national security, economic stability, even environmental health.
Such as?
Well, obviously, submarine intrusions are a primary concern. But you also have risks like illegal dumping of waste, which happens unseen. There's the cumulative impact of acoustic pollution, just the noise from shipping, sonar, construction, which degrades all underwater detection capabilities over time.
It makes it harder for everyone to hear anything clearly.
Exactly. And increasingly critical in our connected world, the threat of underwater infrastructure sabotage. Think about undersea communication cables carrying global internet traffic, or offshore oil and gas pipelines and rigs. These are vulnerable targets sitting on the seabed.
Right, those are huge economic and security vulnerabilities.
Definitely. And even surface activities like heavy shipping traffic create significant subsurface noise pollution that impacts marine life, potentially disrupting ecosystems and fisheries, which also ties back to economic security for many coastal states. The domains are linked.
It really makes the Indian Ocean sound like,
Yeah.
well, a perfect place to hide if you're a submarine, but also a very complex environment to manage overall.
It is, and that brings us to a critical point. Why established Western acoustic systems sonar technology, often developed and optimized for places like the cold North Atlantic or the deep, stable waters of the Arctic, why do they often struggle so dramatically in these tropical waters?
Yeah, I've heard this mentioned before. They don't work as well.
Don't work as well is putting it mildly sometimes. The reality, confirmed by source data and operational experience, is stunning. Western acoustic systems, engineered for colder, often less biologically noisy, more thermally stable waters, can suffer up to a 60% degradation in performance when deployed in the tropical Indian Ocean.
60%? That's huge. That basically means the system might only be working at 40% effectiveness.
Potentially, yes. Or its detection ranges are drastically reduced, or its ability to classify a contact is severely hampered.
Yeah.
That staggering figure, that 60% potential degradation, is the fundamental reason driving the indigenous imperative for India and other tropical nations. You can't just buy tech off the shelf and expect it to work optimally.
Okay, 60% is a number that sticks with you. What is it about the tropical environment that causes such havoc for sound waves for sonar? Can you walk us through the physics?
Sure. It's really a complex mix of environmental factors, a kind of perfect storm for confusing sonar. First, you have intense biological activity near the surface. Shrimp, fish, marine mammals, they all create a lot of clicks, whistles, and general background noise. It's just a naturally noisy environment acoustically.
Okay, so high background noise. What else?
Second, and this is crucial for how sonar performs, you have high salinity gradients, layers of water with different salt content, and most importantly, rapid thermal stratification.
Thermal stratification?
Yeah.
Layers of different temperatures?
Exactly. The strong tropical sun warms the surface layer of the ocean very intensely. Below that, the water gets rapidly colder. This creates distinct layers of water with different temperatures and therefore different densities. It's almost like stacking different liquids or different lenses on top of each other.
And how does that layered water structure mess with sonar? Sonar is sound, right?
Precisely. Sonar works by sending out sound waves and listening for the echoes. But sound travels at different speeds through water of different temperatures and densities.
Ah, okay.
So when a sonar sound wave traveling through one layer hits the boundary between a warm layer and a colder layer below it, or vice versa, it doesn't just pass straight through, it refracts. It bends.
Like light bending through a lens.
Exactly like that. This bending is unpredictable and depends heavily on the specific thermal structure at that exact time and place, which changes constantly. And this bending creates what submariners love: shadow zones.
Shadow zones.
Vast areas beneath thermal layers where a submarine can effectively hide because the sonar signal from a surface ship or even another submarine might just bend right over the top of them or get ducted downwards sharply into the deep ocean, leaving significant gaps in coverage.
Wow. So the water itself actively hides things from sonar.
It does. This unpredictable scattering, refraction, and the creation of shadow zones profoundly complicates acoustic detection and tracking. It means the sonar performance you get in the lab, or even in temperate waters, just doesn't translate reliably. It requires multi-angle approaches, perhaps variable depth sonars, and crucially, algorithms and processing specifically tuned for these tropical conditions.
So the technology that works beautifully in the cold, relatively homogeneous waters of the North Atlantic just becomes unreliable, handicapped in the warm, layered, noisy, biologically dense IOR.
That's the core challenge, and solving this acoustic puzzle, therefore, isn't just about achieving military superiority through better tech. It's almost more fundamental. It's about ensuring that the solutions you deploy, whether imported or homegrown, don't fail spectacularly simply due to the basic physics of the environment.
Which naturally drives the need for homegrown innovation, for solutions developed in and for those conditions.
Absolutely. And you see, this environmental reality, this challenge, also presents a massive strategic opportunity for India.
An opportunity. How so?
Think about the other nations operating in tropical waters, especially the small island developing states, the SIDs across the Indian Ocean, the Pacific, the Caribbean. Think about coastal nations in Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America. They all face similar maritime security needs.
And presumably they face the same problems with sonar performance if they buy Western tech.
Exactly. They often cannot afford the very high upfront costs of sophisticated Western UDA solutions in the first place. But even if they could, they face the same risk minimal performance guarantee because of that potential 60% degradation factor we talked about. It's a poor return on investment.
So India, having been forced to develop its own solutions,
is now in a position to offer something unique. By focusing on homegrown, tailored solutions that inherently understand and are designed to overcome these tropical challenges, India can position itself as a preferred, reliable partner for maritime security in the global south, offering tech that actually works in their waters.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It shifts the focus from just military ASW capability to something much broader, a policy framework almost. You called it Underwater Domain Awareness, UDA.
Yes, UDA is conceived as that broader framework. It's designed to replace the often fragmented approach we see currently, where different ministries, defense, environment, fisheries, transport, science, and technology all kind of operate in their own silos, looking at their own little piece of the underwater picture.
So UDA tries to integrate all that.
It does. It's a multidimensional framework that explicitly integrates 4 core dimensions. One is strategic security, which includes the ASW we've been discussing, but also things like maritime law enforcement.
Okay.
2 is the blue economy, focusing on sustainable use of marine resources, protecting trade routes, managing fisheries, offshore energy.
Right.
3 is environmental sustainability, marine biodiversity conservation, pollution monitoring, climate change impacts on the ocean.
Makes sense.
And 4 is digital transformation, leveraging modern tech like AI, big data, autonomous systems, and digital modeling to manage the domain effectively.
So it pulls all these threads together. How does it work in practice? Is there a model for it?
The practical model often used to describe UDA is built around 3 simple concepts: to see, to understand, to share.
Okay, to see, to understand, to share. Let's break that down. What does to see involve in the underwater context?
To see is basically the data collection part, both physical and digital. This means deploying sophisticated sensors, acoustic arrays, optical cameras on underwater vehicles, environmental sensors to map the seabed, monitor water conditions, listen for sounds.
The huge amount of data, presumably.
Massive amounts, which is why high-performance computing is essential just to handle the flow. And a critical element here, linking to the 4th dimension, is integrating what they call 4th Industrial Revolution, or 4IR components.
Meaning AI and machine learning.
Exactly. Using AI algorithms to process the raw, often very noisy sensor data, filtering out the background clutter, maybe some of that 60% environmental noise we talked about, and translating it into actionable, categorized information, identifying anomalies, classifying sounds, detecting changes, trying to minimize that gap between just collecting noise and actually extracting meaningful signals.
Okay, so to see is about gathering and initially processing the data using advanced tech.
Right.
What about to understand?
To understand is the analysis and interpretation phase. This is where you leverage more advanced capabilities. Machine learning to identify patterns, dynamic modeling to predict changes, and increasingly, the creation of digital twins.
Digital twins, what's that in an ocean context?
A digital twin is essentially a high-fidelity computational model. Imagine a virtual, continuously updated replica of a specific part of the Indian Ocean.
Wow.
This model incorporates real-time data, feeds water temperature layers, salinity, currents, known shipping traffic, maybe even biological activity models, the current acoustic noise profile. It's a dynamic simulation of reality.
And what do you do with this virtual ocean?
You can use it for dynamic analysis and scenario forecasting. For example, you could model how a planned naval exercise might affect the local soundscape and marine mammals. Or you could simulate how a coastal development project, like dredging, might impact sediment flow in nearby coral reefs. Or test different ASW search patterns in realistic simulated conditions.
That sounds incredibly powerful. Instead of just reacting to events, you can proactively model outcomes and plan better.
Precisely. It helps policymakers and operators move from purely reactive responses to more proactive, evidence-based strategy, understanding the complex interactions and potential consequences of actions before you take them in the real world.
Okay, that's to understand. What about the final piece, to share?
To share emphasizes getting the right information to the right people at the right time in a usable format. Secure, rapid, and interoperable data dissemination.
Because it's pointless having great insights if they stay locked in one agency's computer.
Exactly. It requires building reliable communication infrastructure, maybe secure networks, satellite links, and developing user-friendly interfaces. Think GIS integrated dashboards showing environmental conditions alongside vessel tracks, or maybe specialized mobile apps for fisheries inspectors or disaster response teams.
Tailored information delivery.
Right. delivering tailored insights quickly to policymakers, researchers, security agencies, maybe even partner nations within cooperative frameworks. The goal is to foster evidence-based decision-making, transparency where appropriate, and effective collaboration across different agencies and potentially across borders.
Okay, so we've established the hardware upgrade of the indigenous ERSR. We've seen how it fits into this integrated network with P-8Is and MQ-9Bs. And we understand this is all driven by the need to master the uniquely challenging underwater environment of the IOR, leading to this broader UDA framework. Now let's tie all this technical and environmental capability back into the bigger picture, India's grand strategy in the Indian Ocean. What are the geopolitical implications of this rising ASW and UDA capacity?
Well, the implications are quite significant. This enhanced indigenous ASW capability, the whole ecosystem we've discussed, ERSR, the specialized P-8I fleet, the persistent MQ-9B surveillance, underpinned by that growing UDA, understanding it directly and substantively contributes to India's maritime deterrence.
Deterrence against whom, primarily?
Deterrence is generally aimed at potential adversaries, of course. In the IOR context, this capability provides a crucial element for strategic balancing against the ever-expanding naval presences and the increased operational tempo of foreign actors, particularly major powers with growing fleets operating in the region.
So it helps maintain a balance of power.
It does, and it directly supports India's core maritime strategy, which really centers on three main pillars. First, securing the Indian mainland and its strategically vital island territories, like the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Right.
Second, safeguarding the critical sea lanes of communication, the SLOCs that crisscross the Indian Ocean, carrying a huge percentage of global trade and energy supplies.
Absolutely vital.
And third, working towards ensuring a stable, secure, and rules-based order in the wider Indian Ocean region. And importantly, India emphasizes achieving this third pillar primarily through regional cooperation.
Okay, and that cooperative approach is often framed through the SIGER vision, isn't it? Something introduced, nearly a decade ago now?
Correct. The SIGER vision, the acronym stands for Security and Growth for All in the Region, was introduced back in 2015. Its fundamental premise is that security and economic growth in the maritime domain are intrinsically linked. You can't really have one without the other in a sustainable way.
So it's not just about military security.
No, it's broader. It emphasizes cooperative approaches, tackling both traditional security threats like piracy or naval competition, but also non-traditional threats like smuggling, illegal fishing, disaster relief, environmental degradation, and the method is cooperation. Joint naval exercises, shared patrols, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, HADR operations, and focused capacity building programs for regional partners. It's really a philosophical umbrella for promoting regional stability through partnership.
And I understand that vision is now evolving or perhaps scaling up with this newer concept called Mahasagar. What's the difference there? What does the MAO-SHI add?
Mahasagar essentially stands for Mutual and Holistic Advancement for Security and Growth Across Regions. It takes the foundational ideas of SAGAR, the link between security and growth, the cooperative approach, and significantly widens both the geographical scope and the level of ambition.
Widens it how? Beyond the Indian Ocean.
Yes. It explicitly looks to expand cooperation beyond just the immediate Indian Ocean littoral states. It aims to encompass the broader global south, extending partnerships and influence further afield into Africa's eastern coast more deeply, across Southeast Asia, and even into the South Pacific Islands.
So it's taking the SAGAR model global, almost.
Not quite global, but certainly expanding the regional focus significantly across regions. It represents a maturing and scaling up of India's maritime strategic outlook, ensuring those core pillars, security, economy, ecology, remain central, but applying them to address wider concerns and build partnerships across a much larger canvas, reflecting India's growing capabilities and interests.
Okay, so Mahasagar is SAGAR writ large, applying the cooperative model more broadly across the global south. And this is where that indigenous UDA capability we talked about becomes really interesting, not just as a military tool, but as a diplomatic one.
Exactly. This is where defense technology development, environmental understanding, and diplomacy achieve a really powerful synergy.
How does that work?
Remember how we discussed India spending the last 50 years developing tailored, relatively low-cost UDA solutions in-house, specifically to overcome those unique tropical water challenges in the IOR, that 60% degradation problem?
Right, because the imported stuff didn't work well enough.
Well, now, having cracked that code, or at least made significant progress, India possesses a unique effective capability and knowledge base that often cannot be reliably sourced from traditional Western suppliers, at least not without huge cost and uncertain performance in tropical waters. So India can now offer these specific, tailored UDA solution sensors, processing techniques, training, maybe even access to analytical tools to other tropical nations, particularly the SIDs and developing countries in the IOR, Africa, Southeast Asia, the Pacific, who face the exact same acoustic challenges.
So instead of those nations being forced to potentially buy expensive foreign equipment that might underperform dramatically due to the physics of their own waters,
India can offer them a proven, context-specific, often more affordable, homegrown alternative or partnership.
that sounds like a very attractive proposition.
It is. And it does a few things. It reinforces regional solidarity. It positions India as a leader, not through imposition, but through genuine partnership and co-creation. It reflects a different approach, more people-centric, knowledge-driven, focused on capacity building, tailored for the specific challenges of tropical waters.
Less about just selling hardware, more about enabling partners.
Precisely. The goal is to empower partner nations with sovereign capability, giving them the tools and knowledge to manage their own underwater domain effectively, rather than trapping them in a cycle of dependency on expensive imports that may not even function optimally in their unique environment. It builds trust and long-term relationships.
So this entire integrated approach, stretching all the way from the technical details of a single rocket like ERSR through the complexities of P-8Is and drones, grappling with the physics of tropical waters, building a UDA framework, and then linking it all into the grand diplomatic vision of Mahasagar, that whole chain represents the real story here.
That is the true measure, I think, of India's evolving maritime power and its emerging role as a key regional security provider and partner, especially across the global south.
So let's bring this incredible level of detail right back to where we started, that quiet test of a short-range rocket, the ERSR. That moment, seemingly small, wasn't just a technical footnote in some report. It was really the public confirmation, however quiet, of the final lethal piece fitting into a much larger, comprehensive, integrated strategic architecture.
Indeed, you summed it up perfectly. The real shift happening beneath the waves isn't just about one piece of technology, one rocket. It's about the development of a holistic, increasingly indigenous capacity, the capacity to link air, surface, and subsurface assets, sensors, and shooters into a seamless detection-to-strike chain. And crucially, this capacity is being driven by and tailored to a deep, hard-won technical understanding of the unique and incredibly challenging operating environment of the tropical Indian Ocean.
An environment where, as you said, off-the-shelf foreign technology often fails or underperforms significantly.
Exactly. That very challenge, the failure of standard solutions in this specific acoustic environment, has arguably forced an innovation path within India. A path that now serves not only its own national military security needs, but also bolsters its diplomatic leadership and cooperative security goals through the UDA framework and offerings to partners.
So the ERSR's rocket, the specialized P-8I with its unique MAD sensor, the cost-effective surveillance from the MQ-9B drones, it all comes together. It's part of ensuring India isn't just reacting to threats in the IOR, but is actively shaping the understanding and security of the subsurface domain. And through concepts like UDA and Mahasagar, potentially establishing a foundation of shared maritime security and knowledge partnership for many nations across the global south facing similar environmental challenges.
Absolutely. This realization of indigenous UDA capability, demonstrated piece by piece with systems like ERSR, really serves as a critical, almost non-negotiable foundation. A foundation for India's evolving maritime power, for its regional deterrence posture, and perhaps most importantly, in the long run, for contributing to stability and cooperative leadership across the Indian Ocean region and beyond under that expansive Mahasagar vision.